Hello and welcome into the KE Report. I'm your host, Shad Markwitz, and today we're getting an update on Dryden Gold Corp. Dryden Gold is traded on the TSX.V under the ticker DRY and on the OTCQB under the ticker DRYGF. And I'm joined today with the CEO and Director of Dryden Gold, Trey Wasser. And Trey, always great to have you on the show. And we're going to be really giving people the skinny on what happened in 2025 as far as the overall exploration program. Just as a reminder to people listening in, Dryden Gold has really a district scale land package, and there's three regional areas we'll be discussing: the Gold Rock Camp, the Hyndman area, and the Sherridon area. And you had work at all three areas. You split the duty with your team between some of the Dryden staff and also some contract workers to really cover this whole giant land package. Now, most of the work this year, as we will discuss, was at the Gold Rock Camp. A lot of it focused at the Elora-Jubilee gold trend that goes up into the Pearl and the Laurentian targets. I guess let's maybe start there just for breaking this down segment-wise. Trey, give us a recap of the main takeaways you want people to know about all the work the team did at the Gold Rock Camp at the Elora Gold System.
That's a great intro, Shed. I almost feel like you've covered it all. But seriously, thanks for having me on again. Yeah, we started this year, as you said, with four stated goals. Really, we wanted to expand the Gold Rock area, what we call the Gold Rock Target area within the larger Gold Rock Camp. We then, wanted to explore the regional targets at Hyndman and Sherridon. So that was goals 2 and 3. Where we had at Hyndman, we had a discovery with some mapping and ground sampling in 2023. So we were following that up with a channel sampling program. And then at Sherridon, following up on some historic drilling and ground samples down there, trying to figure that area out. Hyndman and Sherridon being regional targets and completely different mineralized deposit styles than Gold Rock Camp. The fourth goal then was to drill up at Mud Lake, which is about 2 kilometers north of the Gold Rock target area, and prove periodicity. In other words, that we can find more of these Gold Rock target areas within the Gold Rock Camp. And we have in our resource pipeline at least a half a dozen, maybe more, target areas that our mappers have already identified that will be developing in there beyond Mud Lake. So of the three, three of the four, of course, we've been successful with, and the fourth, Mud Lake, we've got the results pending there from a 3 or 4 hole drill program. So at Gold Rock, what the big breakthrough for us this year was really early in the year, finding that third deformation event, which really helped us to start to hone in and zero in on the high grade gold nuggets areas that along the Elora Gold system. And then as we stepped up with the new permits in hand, we started hitting these stack structures that were basically, call them hanging wall structures, hanging wall 1 through 5, that are coming off of the Jubilee system. These structures have very little, if any, surface expression. And so, where we started this year at Gold Rock with really 3 known structures, the Big Master 1 and 2 quartz veins and the Elora shear zone system, we now have about a dozen different structures in there. And some of them have been shown some very high grade. Of course, we had the hanging wall structure with over 300 grams per ton, over 3.9 meters. When we drilled the gap hole that went all the way from Big Master to the Elora, we hit 9 structures in there, and one of them as high as 55 grams over 3.5 meters. And then along strike, we did drilling at Pearl, hit more of the stack structures there, and discovered 2 high grade shoots at Pearl. So it's been a big year. We didn't really do a lot of work back on the Big Master system this year. We pretty much focused on Elora, and now we still have some fill-in holes between Jubilee and Pearl, and between Pearl and Laurentian, and some work at Laurentian. and a few more holes into these high grade hanging wall structures there near Jubilee. And those are, we've got all but a couple back from the lab. And what the team is doing there more is putting this together with to where we'll have the long sections for that with from Jubilee to Pearl that is in the current presentation. That'll be all filled in now with these holes that we drilled in between. And then they'll be putting long sections together for at least two, maybe three of these hanging wall structures. So you really start to see how this is coming together. And, it's difficult in that each one of these hanging wall structures to drill the high grade, you can't get lucky enough. Well, we have in some cases, but for the most part, you have to drill each one of these structures separately. You can't expect to go through the one structure and then hit the high grade on the next structure and then hit the high grade in the Elora shear system. So, for example, the hole that we hit 300 grams per ton in the hanging wall, when it hit the Elora system, it was only 2 grams. So, you have to almost drill these individually, and it's going to be a process, but we want to make sure that we really understand what we've got here so that we can plan out a 2026 program that really starts to pull this together for the market.
Well, I think that's a great summary, Trey, because it's really been a transformational year for the company. I mean, we were following along with things in 2024, but you didn't have the understanding of that D3 deformation zone, that faulting. And so now that you have all three faults lining up and those data sets lining up, you have dialed in the recipe here to start hitting pay dirt each time. But like you say, you kind of need to attack each of these targets separately. So it seems like the balance of the work was really at the Gold Rock Jubilee, the historic mine area there, the Pearl Target, which used to be called the Intersection Target earlier in the year. So even that transformed this year as far as the name. And then the Laurentian Mine, a historic mining area where you put some holes in. But as you said, you filled in the gaps now between those areas, and those holes are still going to be coming out. But the other thing that you really dialed in was the understanding that there's kind of a halo effect of 1 to 2 gram material in a bulk tonnage sense along this whole shear system. And then within that, pockets of high grade. And so we were joking around in the last call with Mara and calling it raisin bread, where you have kind of a background 1 to 2 gram material that's still economic and carries the day. And then all these high grade areas that you hit raise the overall grade profile. So maybe speak to that effect and how the market is sleeping on some of those 15 meters of 1 gram and segments like that. But they're also important too to tie this all together.
Well, that's exactly right. It's really evident right there at Pearl where we hit, like you just mentioned, 15 meters of 1.15. There's another 14.8 meters of 0.63, 8.8 meters of 2.26, all in different stack structures there. It really widens out at Pearl, these things. And, these stack structures really start to add up. The beauty for us is that we're hitting these stack structures near surface or at surface. And at Red Lake, for example, the key at Red Lake was for them that when that really became a big mine was when they got down about 300 meters is where they started hitting these stack structures. And they hit 10 of them there. And that's where, once they started mining those, and they just continued to hit higher and higher grade as they got deeper, which is typical of these Archean lode gold systems. So what we're thinking we're going to be able to pull together here is just focusing between Jubilee and Pearl for the time being. We think we've got 30, 40 meters anyway of stack structures that have 0.75 gram to 2 grams. And then these raisins that are hitting, 300 grams, 55 grams, 30 grams. So those raisins will bring up that average grade. And we think we're going to be able to pull something together there. And I think that's the area we'll probably be focusing on more between Jubilee and Pearl and these other stack structures, and then working our way over to Big Master with these stack structures and trying to show that this has bulk mining, open pit kind of potential.
Well, when you bring up Big Master 1 and Big Master 2, there was a lot of historic work done there, and there was even some insanely high grade, bonanza grade hits there that never made sense until this year, now that you can put it in context. So just curious, Trey, do you think next year it may pop a couple of holes into the Big Master 1 or Big Master 2?
Oh, I think Big Master will definitely be, in the program here because, we saw when we did work in 2024 at Big Master, that's when we first started to see these hanging wall structures there. And, we haven't totally figured that out yet. And of course, we had such good results on Elora-Jubilee that got more of our attention. And then as we got the permit so that we could really explore that Jubilee area properly is when we started hitting these stack structures. And so now, we really want to fill this in. And I think what we're going to, be doing is some holes from Big Master 1 through Big Master 2 and on down all the way to the old Paymaster, all the way down to the deformation zone, Manitou to Norwick, which in there is actually Mud Lake is the deformation zone where the actual occurrence is. So we think there'll be a lot more of these structures to the south, and just getting to identify how much of this is there. And of course, as you mentioned it, on Big Master 2 at what we call Treasure now was where it was 53,000 grams per ton over half a meter. Nice halo of mineralization down there too, of 8 to 10 meters of 1 gramish kind of material. And again, we're just scratching the surface there, and we'll be going back down there and really figuring out what we've got all the way across these structures.
Well, and as you brought up there, that Mud Lake is part of the same Gold Rock camp and has this periodicity factor. You actually have a slide in your deck, which I may include below this interview, that shows all kinds of targets the team has identified through mapping and sampling that every so often along this trend, here's another area. So you've got Mud Lake, which is really Gold Rock North, but you also have all these other things like Selby and Gaffney and Snowfall and all these other targets that you're still working up. So there's a potential periodicity where you could have tons of these different areas that have the same kind of mineralized footprint. So maybe just talk to that. And then, like you say, we're waiting on, I think, 3 to 4 holes from Mud Lake.
Yeah, Mud Lake will be the first, and this, our mapper there, John Fingus, he's worked now the last 2 summers out there mapping specifically the Gold Rock camp. And he identified the Mud Lake area last year, so we did some testing on that. And that's where when we got the permit for the Gold Rock target area, moving up north off the patents, we got the Mud Lake. And then there's another anomaly about a kilometer to the north of that was tested this year. But you're absolutely right. Over to the east, we have something that he's very excited about. I think the slide you're talking about, all the Gold Rock related targets are in blue, and you can see that there's quite a few that we're working up. And so this Gold Rock camp, which is about 20 kilometers of strike along the deformation zone there, with all that regional folding. I mean, it just looks just like the Red Lake geology. So very exciting, and I think that's what we want to show the market, that look, we could blow our brains out just drilling just at Gold Rock. And, well, when are you going to put out a resource there? And, we could never drill that deep enough to really give it credit. It's just too hard to drill there. When you start to drill 400 or 500 meters, you're stepping out 700 or 800. You're drilling 700 or 800 meter holes, and very hard to keep the drill on target and keep that drill. The drill is always wanting to flatten out as you get deeper and deeper. And so we will continue, and we just drilled a hole back actually all the way across from Pearl all the way over to Treasure. And by the time we got to the Treasure, where the 53,000 gram per ton hit was, we were down about 350 meters. So we've got a nice deep hole underneath that with, of course, those assays pending. But yeah, it's exciting. The Gold Rock camp is, on its own in these Archean lode gold systems. I really believe there's 20, 30 million ounces in that Gold Rock camp.
Yeah, and to the point you just made, Trey, a lot of times it really takes mining it and getting down underground and drilling from underground to get down to those deeper targets. So that'll happen through the fullness of time. But you want to show that this whole land package of Gold Rock could have multiple areas of interest, that it's truly district scale. But let's broaden the discussion out to the other two regional targets. Now at Sheridan, pretty exciting that this year you put in the first three drill holes. You've done a lot of groundwork there, a lot of mapping and sampling, but now you put in a couple of holes. And this is a different kind of mineralization, as you said at the onset, than the Gold Rock Camp. So maybe give us a nice update on Sheridan.
Yeah, Sheridan, as you said, it's completely different. It seems to be a granitic intrusion there. The geologists, as they're been working this up, they're kind of comparing it geologically to the Cote deposit of IAMGOLD's. Difference being at Cote, of course, that was in the middle of a bunch of lakes, and they had to move lakes and drain lakes and everything. This is on very high ground, very accessible. You can drive a Toyota Camry into where we're drilling there, but what we've hit there is multiple zones going across, some narrower zones that are still intersecting, some 19 meters of 1.28 grams, 2.55 grams over 9 meters in another structure, and then this one very broad structure, which was, one was zero point 0.4 grams over 39 meters, and then all three holes intersected this 135 to 140 meter intercept of lower grade. So we've got 5 kilometers of strike there. We're just scratching the surface and kind of figuring out we've seen these ultramafic dikes, which are, kind of indicative of much deeper rooted structures. And so we're very excited about Sheridan. It's potentially a very big low grade discovery, which would really lend itself, the terrain there, to open pit kind of scenario, and it could get very big. And so we've already in the first holes in the 2026 program have started at Sheridan now. So, we've stepped out to the south. We're looking for more of those structures going across south to north, but we've also stepped out to the east, and we're hoping to hit that wider structure as we get closer to the intrusive, and these ultramafic dikes kind of guiding us is to hit some higher grade in those 136-meter intercepts.
Yeah, so Sheridan's really kind of pulling together as a broad mineralization, kind of that bulk tonnage style, like you say, open pit. But if you can start finding some of those high grade signatures in there, again, it would raise the overall grade profile. But exciting to see the follow up work already beginning for the 2026 season. And I'll put a map for people listening in underneath this interview. You'll see that Sheridan is kind of to the southwest of the Gold Rock camp. But now let's go up to the northeast, up to Hyndman. Again, a totally different type of mineralization, Trey. But you've done some earlier stage work there, and you really got up there this year with some trenching and some channel sampling. So maybe talk about the work going on at Hyndman.
Yeah, Hyndman is again a third style of mineralization, and this was important to us this year to show the district scale potential here. And when you combine the fact that up to the north of us at Next Gold has a deposit, their Goliath deposit is in VMS rocks. We now have shown that in this district there's at least 4 different styles of mineralization, and the district itself is so well endowed with gold that it basically, Chad, doesn't matter what kind of rock you're in, it's got gold in it. The Hyndman is again an area, I mean, that it's intersected by the Trans-Canada Highway. It's been clear cut in areas in there. They kind of go through and do big swaths of clear cutting, and then they'll leave the forest. Then they'll do another swath, and maybe those swaths are about a kilometer that they'll go. And so, the access there again, both Hyndman and Sheridan, you go right off the highway. You access on some excellent logging roads. In the case of both of them, you can drive right to the deposit, where we're drilling and working in a Toyota Camry. So very accessible. And we made the first discovery there right off the road in 2023 at Hyndman. And because of the way that shearing is there, it's veins and altered shear zones in granodiorite. And it's kind of like where it's been washed off, it's like a granite countertop, basically, so very hard to sample and crack. So what we do there is we did channel sampling, which basically is we take a concrete saw and we cut two cuts about 2 inches apart, and then we chip out everything in the middle there, down about 2 inches maybe. And we've got about 2 kilometers of areas between the two areas that we really focused on channel sampling. And the channel sample is coming in at 23.32 grams over 2.8 meters. And that was really consistent across too, because it was 24 grams over a meter and a half and 36 grams over zero point 0.7. So it really, that whole 2.8 was very nice grade across that. The lower grade was 13, 14 grams. So it is, for channel sampling, that's incredible grade. This deposit is very much like NextGold's Goldland project or deposit, where they have about 1.5 million ounces. It's in the same kind of rock, this granodiorite. They have a width there of about 150 meters, and their strike length is just under a kilometer, about 800 meters. What we have here, and we don't know how wide it is, because again, we were only able to channel sample the smaller widths where they're exposed. And so, I was comparing this to Goldland, and Goldland, I said they have 800 meters of strike there, and they've got 1.5 million ounces in the indicated and inferred area there. We've got 4 to 5 kilometers of strike, and we're testing and we'll be drilling on each end of about 2 kilometers of that strike. And so, since we can't go in and do more channel sampling and clear it off, we'll just test it now with the drill rig. And so we've hired again an outside group, Fladgate. Fladgate did all the work for NextGold Treasury Metals over at Goldland, so they understand these deposits. This deposit, compared to whatever it is much simpler than either Sherridon or Gold Rock. It's pretty straightforward. It's either there or it's not. It's how much of it you have once you figure out how wide it is, and we'll do a first pass drill program in there this fall, and we're going to let Fladgate kind of run the whole thing. We'll oversee it, but they'll do the sampling, the logging, everything, and so it'll allow us to continue working at Sherridon and Gold Rock and Mud Lake, and just but have that program ongoing.
Well, I think that's a good spot to wrap it up, Trey, because we've really covered all four areas. The Gold Rock camp, well, really, technically, Mud Lake is part of Gold Rock, but just a different area than the area you've been drilling at the Elora Gold system. You've got all of the work you're doing at Sherridon, all the work you're doing at Hyndman, drilling at all these properties continuing into 2026. We still have 19 holes that we're waiting on assays to come back from the Gold Rock camp and from Mud Lake. So we'll keep tabs on that. And when those come out, we'll get you back on for an update. But a pretty good synopsis of the 2025 exploration program, and a lot of investors excited about 2026. So for those of you listening in, if you want to follow along with all the news, definitely click on the link below down in the show notes. It takes you right over to the Dryden Gold website, straight to their news section. You can sign up for updates that hit your email inbox, or just follow along with the assays as they come out and all the exploration news. Trey, it was great having you back on the show as always, and looking forward to our next conversation.
All right. Thanks, Shad.